there's a lot of doctrine that I cannot sign my name to. Like
Mm-hmm.
the God burning people alive in hell forever. Nope, not
Yeah.
going to agree to that. Not going to
Yeah.
agree that if you're anything but straight, you're not welcome at the table. Like,
Hi, on today's show, Megan and I are going to talk with Anni Ponder. And I'm going to read the bio right now. So it's very interesting, and I think you're really going to love this show. So Anni Ponder is a writer, teacher, speaker, and deep thinker. Following a fulfilling 16-year career as a classroom teacher, she has turned her attention toward writing and speaking about feminine spirituality. Anni grew up within the context of fundamental Christianity, but often had hard questions and observations that did not align with the dogma she learned in church. A free spirit with a great love for the world, its people, and animals, Anni struggled to find harmony within traditional Christianity. While her search for truth and wisdom has led her away from strict adherence to orthodoxy, she and Jesus can't get enough of each other. What delights Anni most is pursuing restored connection to the divine feminine, whom she most affectionately calls Mama God. Having wrestled with mental illness, disillusionment, grief, and loss, Anni's heart overflows with gratitude for the immutable reality that she has never walked alone. Most days she revels in her office writing, dancing, singing, praying, and conversing with friends. She lives with her magnificent husband, spectacular daughters, and marvelous dogs in the Pacific Northwest. So I want to introduce Megan, my co-host, and she and Anni met some time ago. We'll get to hear
Mm-hmm.
that story, and then we'll just break out into the conversation. So Megan,
Right.
take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening. This is my friend Anni, and Anni and I met this last spring in Ojai, California, and it was one of the most beautiful places. And I fell in love with the little city or town or whatever you want to call it. I think you would call it more of a town. I don't know. It has that vibe. And we were there for I don't even know what to tell people this was. Whenever you laugh immediately because you like, what do you even tell people? I call it like a spiritual workshop, but is it really not really a workshop? It was like, okay, so if anybody knows who Rob Bell is, he's like an author. He used to be a mega church pastor. But he had this like change of life and some big questions that I don't think, were answered in his theology that he grew up in. And so he had this change of life, and he wrote all these books that are just really amazing and accepting and loving, and they speak of a loving God, and they are, it really changed the way that I look at a lot of things. And so that's where we met, and that's a little history. So we met at this event where you're allowed one question, and there was 20 people. And so we each sat in front of Rob Bell in a circle of chairs, and we each took turns asking our big question. And as soon as Anni got up there, like, I was just so inspired, and we had spent a little bit of time together before. So, and I think you said to me, you look like a Rob Bell person. And I was like, so flattered by that. I was so flattered by that. I was like, whatever that means, thank you. And I am. And so we realized we were there for the same thing. And yeah, and I was just really inspired by her, and we became friends, and we've kept in contact a little bit. So I'm just really excited to have you here and to talk about your work and what you do. And so welcome. Thank you.
hey, thank you. I'm super stoked to be here. It's really great.
Good.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So I want to read a little story that Anni has on her blog, and I really like this one.
Okay.
So one day at preschool, I was coloring a nature scene with a purple crayon, and Mr. Dan came by to assess my progress. I was so engrossed in my task, I didn't notice him looking over my shoulder. and she's drawing a picture of a tree. Annie, trees aren't purple. And Annie says, looking intently at her artwork and then meeting Mr. Dan's disapproving gaze, she says, mine are. I really like that. I really like that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think that probably says a lot about you for people who don't know who you are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I lead with that story on my website just to be like, okay, to sum up, here's who I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
like
love
it.
that. It sets you up for, to not fit in the box. And I love that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I have kids. Megan has kids. You have kids.
Yeah.
You've been around a lot of kids.
Yeah.
As a teacher.
Yeah.
But I kind of think it's natural for kids to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think their environment and their circumstances shape them to not be like that if they're not like that when they're adults.
Yes.
Right.
So it's nice to see that wasn't removed from you.
Well,
yeah.
thank you. It was for quite a while. And actually, that sort of is a teaser for, I've got a memoir cooking, and it's coming out eventually once I'm done with the third draft and maybe more. But it's called Knowing Trees Are Purple. And that really sums up the story arc of my entire life. So I'll just give you the brief overview. I once knew who I was and what I wanted and what I was about. Various things in this life. We could blame society. We could certainly point fingers at the fundamental church in which I grew up. Many things kind of convinced me I didn't know. And then recently I've come back to a re-knowing of, my trees are purple. Like
Yes.
that's the way they are. And so that is, that's why my website is full of purple trees.
I love it. That's so great. And then, you are talking about things that are going to bring up controversy with people. You know that. I mean, when people have something to say, you can just go back to your, thing and be like, I paint purple trees, and this is this is how I think, and this is how I live, and take it or leave it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to just caution people and kind of tack onto that if you're skeptical, or if you're not skeptical and you have like this tremendous faith in your religion, I encourage you to read her blog, because she pretty much disarms everything. And she has a conversation. When you read her blog, it feels like you're having a conversation with her, even though you don't get to talk back. But it feels like she's talking to you, and she does it in a way that feels like it's accepting and not challenging. And I think that's important, to have a conversation.
Right.
Thank you.
I think that's a beautiful compliment. Yeah.
It really is. I'm going to keep that one. I actually collect compliments that are offered to me, and I'm just going to take that one and keep it. Thank you, Bill.
Okay.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I know we have a hard time doing that, don't we?
Yeah.
I know I feel like I'm working on accepting compliments too. And, most of the time I just find myself like awkwardly just saying, oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't really know.
Thank you. Like with a question mark, like, is this real? Like,
yeah. And, I've been in the marketing world for like the last 15, 20 years. And what I've noticed a lot of people don't do, including myself, is we don't ask for like reviews, testimonials, compliments. And it's not necessarily because, I mean, you feel weird asking for those things, because it's like, you would offer them up if unsolicited, if you thought I was good, right? But that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
People
No,
people
they
won't
don't know
offer
how.
compliments, and they won't offer testimonials, and they won't offer reviews unless you ask. And
Right.
sometimes you need to ask.
Uh-huh.
Maybe ask a few friends to write a review for your book. Hint,
Right.
hint. And then that gets the ball rolling. It's like an icebreaker. It's like, I'm not the first one to go on the dance floor,
Right.
because
Yeah.
nobody wants
Yeah.
to be that person. I
Right.
shouldn't say nobody, but a lot of people are afraid.
Right.
Yeah.
But if there's a few things out there, they'll be like, yeah, I can give a review, or hey, yeah, I can do a testimonial. And for years and years and years, I didn't do testimonials, and I'm like the world's worst doctor in that I tell people what to do, but I don't do it myself.
Got it.
Right.
You know,
Right.
doctors are always the most unhealthy people you meet. They really are, because they don't practice what they preach. I think it's gotten better over the years where they're more healthy, but back in the day, they were just not healthy people because they were just too busy dealing with other people's problems.
Like the
Right,
couple of kids
right.
going without shoes.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to just kind of open this up with like the beginning. I read the story about the purple trees.
Okay.
And my comment to that is, you're clearly an independent thinker. Where do you think that came from?
Okay, well,
When you were in preschool, where do you think that came from? And where do you think it comes from now?
it's a great question. And my name really is Anni Ponder, by the way.
I was going to ask you that. I was
not
like,
my stage name.
it's perfect.
Right.
Well, I noticed that too.
Um, yeah, I recently, and that's actually my maiden name. That's the name I was born with. I have a different married name, but for the public sphere, I go by Anni Ponder. And somebody recently who didn't know that was like, "Oh, why did you choose Ponder as your writing name?" And I was like, "That's the name I was born with." And they're like, "Oh, I thought it was just like descriptive of you." And I was like, "Ooh, thank you. I'm keeping that compliment too."
Yeah, for sure.
So
I love that. I mean, you couldn't have picked a better one.
I know our family emblem is literally the statue of, the statue of the thinker.
The thinker?
Yeah. Which is, I've got my grandfather's statue here in my office. And that's why it shows up in one of my blogs, just like a shout out to my grandpa.
I love it.
But to answer your question, Bill, I have always needed to think very deeply about things. And I've had a few. I've had a handful of mystical experiences in my life that have been really transformative. And I always hesitate to share that because you never know how it's going to land with folks. And so first, like as a disclaimer, if somebody is listening and going, why does she get the visions? Why does she get the dreams? It's not fair. I keep asking it. Like my answer is like, I'm really sorry. I don't know why some people seem to get communication that way and others don't, but I do. And the other thing is, Bill, you would know this from one of my blogs, but like, I really truly believe that in the goodness of God, and that when things don't make sense, like there's more to the story. And so like, keep asking. So that's what I would say about that. But that's all to say, I've been this way since I came out just of my mother's womb. I have needed to think deeply. I've experienced things that can't necessarily be explained any way other than, hey, there's more to the story. And I've always wanted to go really deep. So when I meet somebody, I skip past the pleasantries pretty quickly and like, hey, who are you? What makes your soul tick? What are you really about? What are you excited and passionate about in this world? What battles are you currently fighting? Those sorts of things. So there I am.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
And when we were in California, I feel like a lot of those conversations went deep really fast just because everybody was kind of open to it. Yeah. And like when you're in a situation like that, you're just more open to, what the universe is bringing you, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, did your parents encourage you? Were you like encouraged to be, or not so much because you grew up in a fundamental Christian church? Like,
right. Yes, and I had to do a lot of this emerging faith on my own. So I come from a
Right.
long line of deep thinking people who really want to sit around and talk about what really is truth, what really matters.
Right.
Um,
So it was like your family like lived it as an example. Like
right.
this is just, yeah.
Yeah. Although a lot of the rhetoric in my home growing up, I had a couple of homes because I had split parents. Um, a lot of it was around dogma and doctrine and like what we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a double-edged sword, right? There was a lot of good that came from that, and I've had a lot of deconstructing to do around that. But
Right.
it did give me the language to talk about the mystical things and the mysteries and the things that require really wrestling.
Oh,
And so
yes.
I'm very thankful for my upbringing for many, many reasons, but I did learn how to wrestle and ask questions when I had there were a series of questions that came to me in my adult life, probably right around my early 30s, that rocked
Mm-hmm.
my world and expanded everything and changed my whole world.
Mm-hmm.
When I started asking those kinds of questions, I think it was hard for some of my family members to accept that. I know it was.
Yeah.
And so I had to do a fair bit of like, hey, my can we use colorful language on this podcast, by
Yeah.
the way? Okay. Like my fucking trees are purple. Like leave me alone.
That's right. Yes.
I had to do a bit of boundary setting and
Yeah.
um clarifying like we can be in relationship, but I am absolutely forging my path here, and
Yeah.
it's not going to look like your path. So I don't know if that
Right.
answers the original question, but that's where we.
Right. Okay. I just feel like it led straight into this question. But like, so all of a sudden, I mean, it's kind of like a coming out story. Like, I am not fully what you think I am or what I've been,
Mm-hmm.
I think a little bit differently. And so do I. And I always feel like this like stigma or like this taboo or like this like anxiety or worry that like I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be mislabeled or, or judged in some way because there's no way I could possibly explain what my faith looks like to somebody, but yet I'm calling myself Christian.
Yeah.
And then and then it kind of doesn't make sense. Bill and I were having a conversation and I think I told him, but yeah, I call myself Christian or I'm a Christian but I'm Christian. And I think that he was like, what?
What?
Like, are you though? Like, I don't know. I felt a way about, yeah. And
This is
so,
literally why I needed to write a blog called "Barely Christian, Fully Christian."
yes,
Like you
yes.
can't
Tell us
explain this
about that.
all.
I need to, yes, help us all, please. Can you summarize that blog?
Oh yes, I certainly can. Okay. Um, yeah. I identify as barely Christian, fully Christian. The barely is because of several things. I can barely stand to be around politicized Christianity or
Mm-hmm.
super, we know the right answer. And if you like lifestyle has to align with, you know what I'm talking about, like
Yeah.
the, the kind of Christianity that we see showing up so loudly in evangelical America and fundamental America. It's really sad to me. Like I just want to distance myself from that. And so that's why sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when I first meet folks and I'm not sure where they stand, but I get the vibe that they might not be comfortable around somebody who identifies as Christian. I
Yeah.
often say like, hi, I am a Christian, but like, please don't hate me. I'm not an asshole.
Yes. And
Okay.
why do we have to? I mean, it's sad that we have to say that. Like, and I try and frame it too, but I'm like, yeah, and I do it in different ways, but
Yes.
it's, yeah.
Well, writing this blog has helped me to clarify that. and it's helped me to like, some people are like, hey, don't do the I'm not an asshole thing because it really sounds crass. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. I'm looking for better language, always looking for better language.
Are
But
we just not supposed to sound that? I mean, are women just not supposed to sound that way? I don't know.
there it is.
Well,
Let's go
there's
there.
layers to that. There's layers to
Oh,
that.
we could put a
Yeah.
pin in that and come back and do 12 episodes there.
Let's. Yeah.
But the other things that I like want to disassociate myself from that maybe some people conjure up when they're thinking about Christianity is
Yes.
There's a lot of doctrine that I cannot sign my name to, like the God burning people alive in hell forever. Nope, not gonna agree to that. Not gonna agree that God is a white man. Just like, sorry, that doesn't actually add up. And not going to agree that if you're anything but straight, you're not welcome at the table. Like there's so much dogma and doctrine that I can't associate with.
Same.
that I don't want people to think, oh, she said she's Christian, she must vote this way, she must, blah blah blah.
Yes.
But I call myself fully Christian because I really do believe, like, there's nothing in me that needs to argue this point. I always check in with my whole body. Nobody in me, nothing in me wants to argue. Every part of me believes that Jesus is God's son and came here to show us how to live and forgive and how to die, and that death doesn't last. Like, I think that's the whole point. So like, I believe God is good and Jesus is God's son. And that's all that I think is required for me to say I am a Christian.
So I love that.
That's beautiful.
And
yeah.
This is a good segue for the notes I took when I read Barely.
You did? Okay.
Yes.
So I read Barely and a couple posts linked within it, including Fully.
Okay.
So I got like the bookends.
So you got the gist.
And I have to say, you're grounded. In one of your blog posts, you said something about people being spectacular. I think you're spectacular.
Oh. Yeah.
And while I don't dig Jesus like you do,
yeah,
I don't even know that he really existed in the way that we've been taught.
Right.
I'm pretty sure he's not white. I don't have to, and I don't, and I feel like you won't hold it against me.
No.
And like I've said a few hundred times before, love is love.
Yeah.
People are people.
Yeah.
We can love, we can hate, or we can be indifferent. And two of those really suck.
Two of those absolutely lead to nothing good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said.
So, I have to say, after reading some of your work, you do write beautifully. And I can see why you were, and maybe you still are, a teacher.
I don't think I've ever rinsed that out of the air. Like, I think I'm always going to somehow identify as a teacher.
Yeah. But you wanted something else, and you did that for a while, and it's okay to change paths. And I think that a lot of the times, like, people think, might ask you questions like, oh, why aren't you teaching anymore? Or do you get a lot of that? Or like, oh, well, why did you leave the career or the path or whatever it is? Like, I know that because my husband gets it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. So why did you get into teaching? What did it do to fulfill you? And why did you leave?
Okay.
Or did you?
All right. Great. This is going to help me like put it into a 2-minute blurb because that's part of my memoir. Okay. I got into teaching because I thought it would be the best thing that I could do if I couldn't be a pastor. And I couldn't be a pastor because I was a woman in my organization that I was a part of. It wasn't really on the table. And so I was like, the next best thing will be teaching.
Okay.
So there's a whole lot there, right? But we'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Well, I need to unpack that in a few minutes.
Okay. What did teaching do for me? I mean, I absolutely love people, and I love young people particularly, although in my teaching career, I've taught everybody from like 4 years old through college students. So like, not just kids, but I love the learning process, and I love the The moment when you're walking alongside a student and the lights come on and they have an aha moment. I dig that. And one of my favorite parts about having been a teacher so long in the same town is I walk around and I run into my former students, and it's such a tremendous joy to see who they are. And they usually have a story that they remember, something that I've long since forgotten that I said or did, or we, experienced together in class. And so what I really loved about teaching and what it really gave me was human connection, just really authentic, fantastic human connection. And then, so it's been about a year and a half since I knew I needed to leave. And there's a whole story that goes along with that. But basically, I told an Uber driver this once. So, like, here's the shortened version. He's like,
I love
that. Because they are psychiatrists.
Oh, this guy was
they really are
a guru. I mean, like, I don't know. He was amazing. So he's like, so why'd you quit teaching? And I was like, here's what came out of my mouth.
Oh, I can't wait.
Because I couldn't not write and speak anymore. I couldn't hold it in. I had to make space for doing this work, and I had to let teaching go.
Yeah.
It was like being pregnant with something that couldn't find the exit. Like, I've got stories to tell, I've got things to say. And actually, my youngest daughter was she 11? I think she was 11 when she knew, and she's like, she's an amazing human. She senses things. Like, in the Christian world, she'd probably get labeled prophet. Like, in the spiritual world, I think people would call her psychic, but whatever, she knows things. And I got back from a trip to Israel my husband and I had gone on. And while in Israel, I like fully knew, the same way that I've known that my trees are purple, right? I knew I had to quit teaching and start writing and speaking. But I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't say that out loud. And when I got home, she called me on the phone. We hadn't even connected in person yet, but she goes, Mom, I have to tell you something. You have to stop teaching. It's time to start writing. And I was like, how do you know that? But she was absolutely right. She's like, I know that you have stories to tell. I know it's time. We were really excited because I was going to be her teacher the following year. We'd been waiting until she got old enough. And she's like, I don't need you to be my teacher. You're my teacher all the time. You teach me every day. You have to quit your job and start teaching. And so that's really what gave me the courage to, like, could I really do this? And so I jumped off the diving board.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. I love that story. And you followed it. And a lot of people would just say, okay, well, I'm just going to, write part-time and, and just do this in my free time. But, like, you wanted to fully immerse yourself into it, and, like, having that big commitment. And teaching isn't just a 9 to 5 or whatever it is. Like,
No,
and you carry a lot, and it's a mental load, and it's all of those things. And I can see why you had to let that go to do this work. And I'm really proud of you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
in one of your blog posts, you equated the divine feminine to Mama God.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Oh, all day long.
Maybe define the two terms and tell me why they're the same.
Okay. All right. Great. So, since I have decided that I am going to identify with the Christian camp, and that's where I'm planting my flag, so to speak. And I did, by the way, I skipped over this part, but, like, I did a walkabout around and ended up back with my brother Jesus, but throwing out a lot of the bathwater. I'd like to say, I don't think I've written this in any blogs you would have seen yet. It may have come out. I don't remember. But I like to say I threw out the nasty bathwater, but I kept the baby Jesus.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I like
It actually
that.
was in one of your
Oh, I
posts.
did
Yeah,
already. Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So within that, I'm like, all right, I'm going to use the language and the spiritual heritage that I'm claiming. And
Mm-hmm.
so the divine feminine, I truly foundationally, this might be belief number 3, even though I've only cited that I have 2. I think this is wet cement, but it's like hardening pretty quickly. I really
Mm-hmm.
believe that what we call in Christianity the Holy Spirit is a feminine being. And I have lots of reasons I can tell you why. And I believe she's our mother. I believe she's where our souls are born.
Ugh,
So, okay, this freaks out your average Christian, right? This is
it
like,
does. It
right.
does.
Like,
And it gives me chills because it's so freeing and beautiful to me. But
yes.
I
Yeah.
know that I'm going to get backlash for this episode.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I am 100% ready for it. And I will
Okay.
take all the heat because we need to talk about this. And this is
We do.
beautiful and freeing.
We do.
And, we need to open this door to, I mean, we've hidden her for too long. We've
Yes.
called her other names.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Ugh. Yeah. Let's continue to,
Okay.
what does she mean to you? Yeah.
What does she mean to me? It's everything. So,
Mm-hmm.
growing up Christian, I learned that masculinity is in God's image, but femininity is secondary. And I internalized that message to the point that it had me devaluing myself, not believing that I could have the same sort of status with God. And in fact, here's a revolting illustration. I was once in a class where they were talking about gender roles, which is disgusting because the word role in association with gender is not even within scripture. So, like, that's a
Right.
construct, right? But they're talking about gender roles. And the pastor says, well, the man is the head of the household and blah, blah, blah. And he's got all these reasons for it. And I'm sure that some of your listeners right now in maybe a more traditional camp are like, yeah, there's a lot of verses that, okay, fine. We could talk about that a different day. He's like, so the man's the head of the household. So, like, if Jesus came and knocked on your door and the wife opened the door, Jesus would greet her cordially and then ask to speak with the husband.
What?
And I'm like, oh, okay, what? No, Jesus has come to talk to me. I'm his favorite anyway. He's totally wild
Yeah.
about it. He wants to talk to my husband. Like, what the actual fuck? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's what I grew up thinking, hearing, and believing about myself. And so I
And
was,
that's why you accepted that
yeah,
you couldn't be a pastor. Like,
right. Absolutely. Yes. Because God is
yeah.
all male, like the Godhead. Okay, get this. If your listeners don't know, right, there's 3 parts to the
Yes.
Christian God, right? There's God the Father,
Mm-hmm.
who like seems scary and terrible at the first reading, but I promise you is just like pure love. Okay, then there's Jesus. We've all heard about that dude. And then
Yeah.
there's this mysterious Holy Spirit creature, right? Okay. So God
Yeah.
the Father is obviously a male because Father. Jesus, we believe, was a male. And the Holy
Mm-hmm.
Spirit, fun fact, in the Hebrew, which is the original writing of the Old Testament or the Jewish scriptures, right? Holy Spirit is referred to almost always, if not always, in feminine terms. So the
Interesting.
ruach,
Uh-huh.
the Hebrew word for spirit, is feminine, and so the grammar around the ruach is feminine, the
Uh-huh.
nouns and the pronouns and all that. Well, then you get to the New Testament or the Christian scriptures, and that's where Jesus enters the picture formally on the scene. That's
Mm-hmm.
written in the Greek, and in the Greek, depending on who you ask, the spirit is gendered as neuter or masculine, depending on which source you look at.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, as we all know, when we get to the English translations,
Mm-hmm.
spirit is always masculine. And so we have unwittingly, what's the counterpart to the word emasculated? Like effeminated? Like we have
Yeah.
removed the femininity of this person in the trio of the Godhead. And we have done incalculable damage by not having a divine feminine figure.
Right. Right. Yeah. And we've pushed her down for so long. I feel like that, like, and I don't, I'm going to bring up the Barbie movie because,
okay, let's do it.
I mean, have you seen it?
Twice already, going again.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, we've pushed her down for so long that, you know, we don't even like recognize her. And like they said in that movie, I think it was the mom, she was like, yeah, you know, everybody hates women, men hate women, women hate women. It's complicated, you know, and it's sad. And, you know, it's like we've been conditioned that, like, you know, women, you know, men don't like women, women don't like each other. It's just, it's, yeah.
Like we're rivals with one another. We don't know how to be.
How come? Yeah. How did we jump on that bandwagon?
Right.
Like,
yeah. I've, and so the conclusion that I have come to when thinking about all of this, misogyny, sexism, whatever you want to call it, patriarchy, is that if we want to right this ship, that's a weird analogy, rebalance ourselves. Those of us who want to call out to a deity need a feminine, at least part that, like, okay, there's a lot to be said there, right? We need femininity in our deity, because otherwise being feminine is less than. And, you know, I've heard this whole like, well, you know, gendering God is really silly and foolish and it's a metaphor anyway and blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine. But
then let's use she. Yeah.
Like what's the problem? We have identified God with the masculine for so long that we have created male let's see, how did I want to say this? We've elevated maleness to deity, and so everything trickles down from there. So I am really passionate about encouraging both open-minded Christians who are okay with a little bit of, like, this won't work for you if you're a biblical literalist, like it just doesn't pencil, but open-minded Christians who are okay with a little bit of nuance and mystery. And also folks who are not within this camp, but who are wanting to see humanity get a whole lot better. I think it's imperative that we look at our deity, because everything stems from it. It's like, whether you like it or not, it trickles down. Whatever you hold as the pinnacle of existence influences everything else.
Can I ask you probably an ignorant question from somebody who has not read the Bible?
Oh, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So do we perhaps have this masculine identity of the deity because men wrote the text?
Oh, Bill.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any woman being involved in the writing of the Bible.
Okay. So what you're getting...
Those books were taken out. We took Mary's account out, first of all. We removed it and said, this is not part of the canon. Well, men did that. But yeah.
I am not obviously a trained biblical scholar, nor a expert in Middle Eastern culture 2,000 years ago or any of this, but I think it's Amy Bird who says, I'm a thinking woman, so I can come and have this conversation.
Yes.
Yes. Like, let's do simple math. In the writings of all of the books and letters that compile what we now know as the Holy Bible, the people who were educated to write in the first place were men, and they were living in a very patriarchal society where women were property. Our wombs were the property of our fathers first and then our husbands. Lineage was always traced down through the father. So it's a very patriarchal society. And women weren't educated. We weren't given voice. We weren't believed, which is why it's really curious, Bill. I don't know if you know this, but when Jesus rises from the tomb, depending on which story you're reading in the scriptures, he talks to women first. Sometimes it's one woman, sometimes it's two women. And what's radical about that, and one of the things that gives credibility to Christianity being maybe true, is that if somebody in that time were making up stories, they would never have Jesus appearing to women first, because women weren't believed in court. Their word was no good. And so it's just really like hilarious that Jesus is like, I'm back and I'm telling the ladies first.
Yeah. And he told them to go and tell everybody,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
But my point is, those who control the narrative
yeah.
become the truth.
Well, it's exactly right. It's history is always told by the victors. And so that's the story that we learn. And if the men who were writing, and so you have to know, I'm very comfortable realizing that the writers of scripture were human beings. And yes, I believe that Mama God, our Holy Spirit, was helping them to know what to write. You know, we talk about inspiration. But I do not think she grabbed the pen and forced their hand and dictated every single word. So I don't think it came through without some bias and cultural context and even within the language. So of course these documents are going to be patriarchal because they're coming out of people immersed in a patriarchal society. And so
and look how long that's lasted.
yeah.
So
Let's just look at that for a moment.
You were a teacher, so you know, and you were an English teacher, right?
English, Spanish, Bible, you name it. Yep.
Okay, so language arts.
Language arts.
Let's just say.
Yep.
I'm coming to terms right now, and I've gotten over it. I fully accept it. But it was because of the way I was taught. You said if you didn't know the gender of the person,
right,
you said he.
Yeah.
Right. Oh.
You certainly didn't say she, and you didn't say they, because they is plural.
Oh, and there's a whole other discussion.
Right.
That's another episode.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another discussion.
Right. So all of us, for better or worse, were taught, unless you're 10, we're taught that you default to he.
Right.
So maybe those writers defaulted to he because they just didn't know, or, and I think it's more the latter than what I just said, they were men and they wrote like men.
Right.
Right. But the reason that we default to he is because who made that rule?
See, that's a great question. Who made that rule?
Yeah.
Yes. And so if maybe this will head off some of the backlash that you're probably sure to get, Megan, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm used to it.
I like to ask this question. Actually, I've got a blog that's coming out on Friday that asks this question. If you're curious or intrigued or maybe aghast at what I'm saying about the Holy Spirit being Mama, okay, let me just ask you this one question real fast before we even, like, I could tell you a lot of evidence. There's a lot of scriptural evidence for the feminine deity, but before we could even go there, I would ask this one question, and here it is. Why couldn't part of God be feminine?
Right.
Like,
where does it say anything?
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, if you want to go with the whole, this is where I was getting at earlier, I think I dropped this thread. If God the Father is a male and Jesus is a male and the Holy Spirit's also a male, like, first of all, I have questions. Does that make him like is he a weird uncle? Like, I don't understand this relationship, right? are he and God the Father? Like, dare I say, heresy, gay partners? Like, that doesn't seem to fit with the narrative. Okay, why not? If Jesus is the Son and we've got a father figure in the
Right.
story, take a look around at nature and you'll probably notice that when there's a father and a son, someplace there's a mama.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
Like,
real. She exists. Yeah.
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 And can we, before, because there's probably some people listening who are curious and thinking that we're talking about that this is something that's only for women, like
Oh,
feminine
right.
spiritual, right?
Yeah.
So this is a balance in all people. And we all
Absolutely.
have a balance of masculine and feminine inside of us.
Right.
And all of us have pushed down the feminine for
Yeah.
centuries.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to connect with her, but it is a balance inside every person. I don't care if you're the most masculine male out there. Like
Right.
it's, there is a feminine side of you that needs to be nurtured as well. Right. Would you not say?
Trust and accepted and brought to the
Yeah.
surface. And good gracious, we need feminine
Celebrated.
in the world. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah.
I like this analogy. I talk about this on one of my blogs too. I was watching Mrs. Doubtfire recently. Do you remember the film?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Okay. So for anybody who hasn't seen it recently, Robin Williams is this wonderful dad who loves his children, but his estranged wife won't let him see them on a daily basis. And so he's a talented actor in this movie. And so he like dons a British nanny, an elderly British nanny costume. Like he gets the whole head to toe workout. And he gets a job as the nanny for his children so that he can be near them every day. And I'm watching this film and here it goes. So the nanny, Mrs. Doubtfire,
Okay.
comes into the home and whips things into shape. And pretty soon the kids are walking up the stairs to do their homework. And they're begrudging because they don't want to do their homework. And so one of them says, I miss Dad. And then the other one says, oh, me too. And the little one goes, me most. And then the camera zooms in on Mrs. Doubtfire's face and quietly, so that the children can't hear, in Robin Williams' own voice, he says, I'm here, guys, in some form. And I tell you what, I had the biggest full body goosebump chill. Like, our mama has never not been with us. We have not been a people without a mother. We've just put her in a suit and tie and talked about her in the masculine. And we have elevated masculinity to this insane point of insanity is the only word that I can use, which is really interesting given my history with mental illness. We could get to that if you want. I'm choosing that word on purpose. It is insanity. It is madness. To not recognize she who has always been with us and she who loves us.
So
It
talk
makes me
about
cry. Like it brings tears. I don't even know why I'm crying already about this. Like, I don't know if it's tears of like, yes. And at the same time, like frustration, like it's like, yes, all of this. And I'm frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's a good segue into something else you write about, which is the mother wound.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about that?
You bet. So it's personal for me. I lost my mom when I was 29 to cancer. But well before I had to bury my mother, my earthly mother, I was already experiencing what, Megan, you've touched on. And it's not just women who are, I believe we all have a mother wound. But when I talk to women about this, it's not uncommon for us to end up in tears because it's so deeply sacred to us. But essentially what I mean by the mother wound is a disconnection from Mama God. That's my language. You could choose your favorite verbiage there. And an relating to ourselves, to the femininity within all of us. You know, if you want to use the language of the yin and yang, that would be the yin energy. If you want to talk about being versus doing, I mean the being part. If you want to talk about the sun and the moon, I'm highlighting the moon. You know, like whatever metaphor works for you. This femininity has been absent for so long, and not absent. Wrong answer. Filter that out. It has been. No, you can leave that in. It's cool. I'm comfortable with not always saying the right thing first.
Yeah, but we'll change it to.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
It has not been absent. It has been unacknowledged. This feminine deity, feminine sacredness within us and also everywhere. And so the wounding is really, I mean, like we've talked about in this culture for a long time about especially girls growing up with daddy wounds, right? If they happen to grow up in a home where the dad was absent or whatever, like, oof, there's so much there. And so I think our language has capacity for the father wound. This is the same thing, but with the mother. And by that, I don't mean if your mom wasn't a good mom or if she wasn't around or didn't give you what you needed or any of that. I mean, we are missing the feminine part of God, and it is messing everything up.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. So what do we do? I mean, give a like
what do we do now?
What do we do now? I mean, like speak about her and, you know, normalize that, you know, have you read The Heroine's Journey? It seems like you have.
Oh my stars. Yes. Short answer, they're the whole volume of it, but yes, I have.
Yeah. I mean, everybody needs to read that. And it's, and I think Rob Bell even has a podcast on it. So just actually, if you don't want to read a long book, which I do recommend reading it, go and find Rob Bell's podcast. It's called The Heroine's Journey, and you'll probably have to scroll back a couple of years to find it. But
I can tell you exactly when it is. It's a year ago. Okay. Because it sent me on this journey. That podcast is why I'm here, like talking to you right now. Yes. Oh, yes. So
I love that. And I wonder if we listen to it at the same time.
Probably. And I am serious. So that podcast, The Heroine's Journey, was in September or maybe August of 2022. So you can look back there. His guest is Kristen Hange. And she is a marvelous human being who does this work, helping people begin to heal from the mother wound and connect with their femininity in whatever way. And, you know, like let the listener understand we don't mean your girlness. When we're using these language, it's actually way beyond the like physical gender or the expressions of gender. And like, I don't mean you need to start wearing skirts and pearls. No, thank you. Don't mishear that. But listening to that podcast would be a great place to start. You're absolutely right. Because Kristen does work around the heroine's journey, which, you know, a lot of folks are familiar with Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Right. And so the heroine's journey is not an outward journey where we go and conquer or get the elixir and bring it back, whatever. The heroine's journey is that going inward and finding the treasure within ourselves and healing from within. And so it really is, I mean, this all sounds a little bit mystical and esoteric, but it really is, we begin to heal from the mother wound when we go inward.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, everybody could start there with this work. And they could also start with going to your website because
it's a good place to go. I'm about, like I said, the blog that's coming out this Friday, that'll be the of September 15th of September. I don't know what day it is today. 2023.
It's the 15th. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. It's called heresy or buried treasure. And
Ooh.
from there, you'll find a little story about an experience I had very recently in church. And then I don't want to reinvent this wheel. A lot of folks are saying this, and so I have some links that are pretty nutrient rich with this
Okay.
material. So if you're like, ooh, I want to know about the for instance, a word that in the Hebrew is a feminine word for God, the Shekinah.
Uh-huh.
Which a lot of us say Shekinah, but I've learned recently is Shekinah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to link to some other thinkers who have done a lot of research and compilation. So there's going to be just like a ton of where, if you want to nerd out on this and really, if you're
Yeah.
like, I really want to know, is this really okay? Can I really address God as my mama? Would that be all right? Or am I going to make
Right.
somebody mad? There's a lot of help for you there. Of course, if you go and Google, is it okay as a Christian to call God mama? You're going to get a lot of different theories on this. You're going to get a lot of different opinions. And I would just say to you, the best thing to do is to get really comfortable with the idea that Christianity is not monolithic. There are
Mm-hmm.
many ways and expressions
Mm-hmm.
to be a Christian. There are many ways of being a
Right.
Christian. And
And
so,
maybe
like,
you're just not talking to your people.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
start digging. There's this woman, I'm going to link, who does something called, it's the Mother God Experiment, I think .com or .org. She has a ton of resources on her website to help people like, oh, maybe I could. What does El Shaddai mean? I'll leave that one for you to research on your own. Like that's
Okay.
okay. So yeah, I'm not going to try to reinvent this wheel because it's being done so well by so many people. But in my own tiny little corner, I'm going to shine my light and just say over and over, like, we need Mama God, we need
Yes.
her, and we're not going to be okay until we find her. And also, she's
Yeah.
right here, so it's not really hard
And
to find.
she's always been here.
And
Yeah.
she's always been here. Yes.
So this brings me to ask you about your question, because back on the day that we met,
Yes.
we all got to sit and ask a question,
Yeah.
and you were somewhere in the middle. And can you tell us? I remember I was sitting directly behind you when you
Okay.
asked this question, and I remember reacting. Would be like, you probably couldn't, like, I probably didn't hide it, but I remember reacting and like shaking my head and like thinking like, no, it's not possible, because
Okay.
I've been there. And can you tell everybody what your question was?
Okay, so that's funny. I hope that I can remember what my question, how it actually came out. It changed like 3 times before I got to that.
Okay. And it's hard to remember because I think, like, it goes so fast, and
Yeah.
you're on the spot and everybody's watching you.
And you're sitting in front of Rob Bell, for goodness sake. I mean,
Yeah.
and
And you get one question.
you get one question, but he's like the most warm, welcoming. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
But I had a targeted question to ask, and then somebody else asked it before me, and so I was like, no, okay, I liked his answer to that, so I'm gonna switch it. So was this what you heard me say? Did I ask Rod Bell, will Christianity ever be able to accept Mama God?
Mm-hmm.
That was it. Okay, that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I do remember his answer.
You told a story, and
Okay.
then you went into that, and it was a beautiful story. And I was like, yes, this is everything that I believe is true. And, and this is beautiful and amazing. And I'm going to buy this woman's book someday. And then, you asked, is the church,
Yeah,
the church going to accept this, or accept this as an idea, or accept me for having these views, or something along those lines? And I was sitting directly behind you, and I think I started to cry because I was like, no, it's like, I don't feel, and that's just my personal answer and my experience. And maybe like I've been jaded, but like I haven't I haven't seen that like widely accepted by, I mean, there's people, there's pockets, there's like little people that I would feel safe, like to say, to talk to about that, but like, it's not, you know, you know, yeah,
It's not orthodox at this point.
not orthodox.
I
Yes. Yeah.
believe, I believe it really was early on. I really believe
Yes.
that Jesus talked about his heavenly mother, but it didn't get really got whitewashed out of the
Yeah.
canon. I believe that the early folks early on in this Christianity pursuit were comfortable with that, but for the longest time, it's been taboo. And so you're right.
Yeah.
And I remember what Rob said. Now that I'm thinking about this again, I said, is Christianity ever going to be able to accept Mama God? Because I want to talk about her within this context. And he said no.
Yeah. Did he say no?
He said no.
Okay.
And I really hope that he's wrong. And I actually think,
I
I mean,
hope that we're all wrong. I
I hope
do.
we're all wrong. Right.
Uh-huh.
And actually I have good reason to hope that it's changing, and that, so you'll have to read this Friday's blog, because I tell a story about where that is changing. And I attend this wonderful congregation up here. I'm part of an Anglican church now,
Ooh,
where I find great sustenance for my soul. And last week in church, somebody mentioned her, and I was like, oh, what?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do wonder if Rob's immediate response, no, Christianity will not accept this, kind of like move on and go do your thing,
Do
but
your
don't
thing.
expect Christianity to say, yes, I accept. I do think
Yeah.
there's an element of truth there. And that's why I'm really glad that I didn't become a pastor,
Mm.
because I don't know that I would have had the intellectual freedom to go where I've gone if I were getting a paycheck from a church that needed me to preach male
Yeah.
God only. And so
Mhm.
I have this freedom now. Like I'm not getting a paycheck for anything that I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I have the ability to say, we got to talk about her. But Rob said something else. He's like, you gotta get ready. They're going to call you names, right? Like, you remember
Oh
what he
my
asked
gosh, I
about?
remember this part because when he said that word, I was like, "Oh, I
Right.
feel it. Like I feel like I've taken that name on." He said the word. He said, "I'm going to say a word, and you tell me where it hits you, where you feel it in your body, and what it feels like." And he said the word witch,
Yep. Yep.
and I felt it.
Yeah.
Did you feel it?
Whole body experience.
Yeah. And
Yeah. There's a lot there too.
there's a lot. And I've been called that.
Yeah.
Like I've been, and it's a really unfair and really, yeah.
Well,
Tell us about, yeah.
that brought up
Tell us about,
a whole ton of stuff for me, because I don't know about your history with Christianity, but I was brought up to absolutely fear witches.
mm-hmm.
So I already have this like, oh no, right? And yeah, so I have that visceral response within me. And now that I've had a little bit more life experience, I'm like, actually, I've known some people who identify as witches who are like some of the best people I've ever met. And so,
Right.
right, okay.
Right.
So that word
It
is
can be a
really
beautiful,
charged.
yes,
Yeah,
it can be a beautiful thing, but in the way that it is meant
right.
for that, in that
Yes.
context, like to feel that feeling. Yeah.
Well, the historical context of like Christians burning witches or suspected witches
Mm,
alive, and torturing them beforehand, it's meant to absolutely drive fear into the heart of anyone who would dare step outside the lines of orthodoxy. And so
mm-hmm.
when Rob said that, I don't know if you remember my response. He's like, how does this word sit with you? Okay, witch. And then I'm like, oh yeah, my therapist said they would call me a witch. And also reminded me like, they burn witches, and I'm like, yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
That's right. And then one of the ladies, I don't remember I don't know if you heard this, but one of the ladies in our circle, she's like, well, if you have to go, what a glorious way to go. Or that's a
Right.
new thought. Thank you so much.
Right.
But the heart of, or what I'd want to say about that is, as a Christian, I am certain that when I open my mouth to speak about the love of God, I'm probably going to get a lot of backlash, probably from many different sides. And people are going to be furious because what I'm talking about is what I mean, I'm talking about something that got Jesus nailed to a cross, which is, freedom, love, acceptance, your original goodness, your original blessing. And you don't have to impress God. God is already wild about you. And nobody can tell you differently. Like, nobody can take that from you, right? That right there is terrifying to folks either making money off of religion, having to make sure that people do it their way, right?
Yep.
Because it's free. It's literally free. And it's terrifying to people who are coming from various other perspectives. So, like, as soon as I open my mouth and say this, yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of backlash. And that's why I started crying there in that circle, because I'm aware that even members of my own family or my tribe, like, the things that are coming out of my mouth are unacceptable,
Right.
heretical. But I can't be silent. And also, P.S., Christians are supposed to be willing to accept the consequences and say it anyway. So,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
here I am.
So can I ask you why? And maybe you've said this and I just didn't understand it. Why did Bell say no?
Oh,
Was it because and I see two possible reasons. One is no, because that's just not cool and nobody's going to accept that. It's written in stone. Or two, he doesn't believe it.
I think it's 3.
Okay.
Because it changes everything. And if Christianity wants to look at Mama God, we have to rewrite every song we sing. We have to rewrite all of our liturgy. We have to reevaluate the whole story. And then it's terrifying, because then it's this slippery slope analogy, right? Oh no, if we've been wrong about this, what else have we been wrong about? And now are we just gonna, like, devolve into paganism, whatever Christians are afraid they're going to devolve into? Because it's a game changer. It's like, it shifts the entire narrative for there to be a heavenly mother. And that's too scary. Christianity is built in a higher, okay, let me be careful about my words here. Many Christian organizations are based upon hierarchy, and what's at the bottom of that is patriarchy. And not to say that an organization can't have a leader, because I'm not that naive, but Christianity would have to change a great deal in order to make space for Mama God. And I think that's why Rob Bell realized, no, they're not going to do this. It would require too big a growth spurt.
Right. And is the world going to catch up? Like, is the world, like, is society going to accept worshiping a female God?
Right.
Like, how beautiful would that be? But I mean, and I do believe that we can get there. Are we going to see it maybe in our own lives? But yeah, I'm widespread. I don't know. And maybe he was talking about like widespread in our lifetime. Is this going to be an acceptable thing to, yeah. And I don't know.
I
Maybe
don't know.
not.
And you know, just knowing what little I do about Rob, you know, he said some pretty heretical things while still within the confines of Christianity, right? He said, you know, let's really interrogate this belief that God keeps people alive just to torture them eternally. Like, right? That was one of his big things in his book, Love Wins. Like,
yes.
Would a loving God do that, right? And Christianity didn't know how to handle him, right? He was
Right.
called all the things. He was called a heretic.
Right.
He was called like blasphemous, whatever. And so in his own experience, Christianity couldn't handle what he had to offer.
Right.
And I hope that Christianity has grown. I think the world is opening up to accept. You know, we see this everywhere, signs of femininity where there has only been masculinity within organizations and structures and all kinds of things. And again, I'm not talking about gender. Let's just clarify that. But the collaboration and being versus doing, like there's a lot that the world is beginning to have an awakening to. And so I think it does happen for Christianity, which is why I've decided to talk about it from within. Instead of saying, screw this, I'm out, I can't be a Christian anymore, I got to talk about Mama God and that's not acceptable. I'm saying I'm here. I'm not leaving.
Yes.
And she is for real. And you can't get me out of that.
Yeah. And here's another thing. So we tend to think of, oh, what kind of battery is dying? Is it my AirPods? We tend to think of Christianity as this one thing, but like the more that we start accepting that, like, it's okay. Like you can have all of these beliefs and still call yourself Christian. I can have all these different kinds of beliefs and still call myself Christian. Like, I think that there's a lot of power in, or a lot of something in, like being able to still claim that, or maybe being brave enough to still claim that. Like, I think that, you know, because it would be easy to walk away and say, I am going to worship Mama God. There's no place for me here. That's not really being brave with your life. It is in a way, but you are keeping yourself, like, you're not isolating yourself. And yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say something that's probably going to make you both mad.
Oh, bring it. These are my favorites.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my ears is up. Here we go.
So let's just agree for the argument that Jesus is great, Mama God exists, all the stuff we've talked about, right? The human species isn't doing well. How can we collectively come together to not only embrace Jesus's or the Bible's teachings, but live them so that we're all better off? Because it's great to talk about Mama God, and maybe that's important to you, and maybe it's not. But how is that gonna? I mean, at the end of the day, what is this all about?
Right. Like, how does this help? Is that what you're getting at? Like, okay, let's say we assume Mama God is real. We stay within Christianity if that's where we are. And now what? Is that what you're getting at?
It's kind of a now what? It's like, okay, let's just take those beliefs, right? And okay, we all believe that. Let's just pretend, because we're never all going to believe that. Well, let's just pretend. Let's pretend that these words in a book are gospel, and they make sense. Like, you know, don't covet your neighbor. You know, blah 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 blah, all that stuff, right? It's all good and true. That, to me, I mean, on and there are many layers and levels to this, right? Like, if we all believed that, we'd have a better chance of actually being that. But we all know that people, I think people think they believe these things, but they don't act like they believe these things. So why is there crime? Why is there hate?
Mm,
Why are there people who like want to hang gay people? Why do we have all these problems if let's just assume everybody believes this stuff?
right.
What do we do about it?
Absolutely.
How do we make all of us better? Because at the end of the day, I think that's what we all want.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm,
Like, why pursue this, like this spiritual, religious thing that seems very individual,
mm,
right? You have your journey, Megan has hers, and I have mine.
yeah.
And one day we could talk about mine, and I think it would be really weird to you. But why, at the end of the day, I think most, at least what I'd say, good people
Mm,
want all of us to be better off.
mm-hmm.
So how do we apply that individual kind of micro thing to the macro level of everybody or the collective all?
I have an answer, but I want to hear yours.
Oh, I want to hear yours.
Okay.
Yeah, rock, paper, scissors. You go first.
Yeah. I think that it's not individual. And I think that a greater awakening to a feminine energy that has been never acknowledged is a larger, bigger thing than we're, than we're giving it credit for. Like, it's not just a belief system, it's almost like an energetic shift. Like, if we can focus our energy in a place that is maybe more balanced, feminine and masculine, maybe we wouldn't exist in a world as it exists today. And maybe it's something that we can't even fathom because we have not really given that much space. But I think that it's like about a larger oneness, and like a waking up to that we're all not separate beings, that we have like this collective consciousness that we're like all a part of.
Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense? Yeah.
Like, I want to do cartwheels right now because I could not agree
Okay.
more.
Okay.
So Jesus had this really interesting thing he said. So these super religious people were coming up to him, and he was casting out demons, exorcising, dark forces from within people. And the hyper religious folk of the day were like, oh, he's doing this by the power of Beelzebub, or whatever word they're using for the dark force, the dark lord. And Jesus says, look, how can Satan drive out Satan? A house divided will not stand. So Jesus is speaking to the like, what I think you're really getting at, Megan, is the unity of who we all are. And I've had some experiences that we could talk about one day, maybe off the air first, because they were pretty out there, where I have come to see, separation is a disease in my mind. There is no other. We are all interconnected. I love that. Yes. I think it's a South African word, Ubuntu, meaning like we are people through other people. We don't exist in solitude. And when we try, it leads to all kinds of sadness, and separation does not breed health. And so I always go back to Jesus' words: a house divided against itself will not stand. And I really think, Bill, to answer your question more directly, an awareness of and an openness to the feminine energy that I call Mama God unlocks within each of us the thing that wants to reach out and see how we are not that different from one another, how we could collaborate instead of compete, how we could not view each other or the animals of this world, or the plants, or the minerals, or whatever we find as resources, but rather like treasure to be cared for. I think that what we have been missing is the feminine energy that pushes us to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. And yes, that is what I was trying to say, but you put it way more beautifully. So good job.
I think we worked together. We got there together, Megan.
We got there. Yeah.
Does that
make sense?
How does that sit with you? And coming from your perspective, how did that land?
It does, except my follow-up to that is, I'm all for the greater good and getting people to come to Jesus, quote unquote. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the human species has that long.
Right. Okay.
So we could just keep talking.
Okay.
We don't. Yeah. No, I think this is all interesting, and I'm in case you can't tell, I'm skeptical.
And thank God for you, because without skepticism, we just like wholeheartedly swallow something that we don't agree with. And like, one of my favorite uncles identifies as an atheist, and his line to me has always been, I don't want to say I believe something that I can't agree to. And if I die and end up like facing a God, and the God's like, why didn't you believe in me? My answer will be, I couldn't, like, the brain that you gave me couldn't do the math and science to accept your existence. And I didn't want to do it inauthentically. And I'm like, perfect. Don't say, oh, I now believe. If there's part of you that's like, oh yeah, that is hogwash, like that's not. So I have full love and acceptance and what's the word, like, arms around folks who are like, yeah, God, that's your thing. That's not for me. Fantastic. Please don't try and say, oh yeah, well I could maybe, if you think that's a load of hooey, like, don't be inauthentic. If your trees are not purple, I do not want you painting your trees purple.
Right. Paint them a different color.
Yeah.
And I have speakers
Cool.
now, so I got to hear that.
Good.
But,
Awesome.
but the question that I missed was, Bill, did that, like, what did you think about that answer? Is there a short way you can answer that?
No.
No. Okay.
That was the shortest way I could answer that. So yes. So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So let's just shift gears because that was a natural break. We're starting over the recording. We gotta do the whole thing over. So do you remember what you said?
Oh my gosh, I can't. I cannot. But I do want to wrap it up, and I'm glad that I have sound again. But I do think it's about, learning this system and playing with it. And like, I didn't know that I had to change a setting because my AirPods died. Like, I had to go in and change everything. So I don't know. It's probably just trial and error. We'll be really good at this, like, in a long time, like a year.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And to be fair to Riverside, when your hardware like fails, like she ran out of battery, they can't anticipate that,
Right.
They can't do anything.
Yeah.
Or your internet goes haywire. They can't blame them for that.
Right. Same thing would have happened with Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think I have one more question.
Okay.
No, I have two, sorry. Can I just do them?
Please.
Yeah.
All right. So on this podcast, we often talk about success. And I put that in quotes.
Yes.
How it's defined a little or a lot differently by each and every person.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 questions around this one, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay.
First question is, and I think they're going to be the same answer, but
okay.
Prove me wrong.
All right.
The first question is, how do you define success? The second question is, how would God define success?
Oh, Yeah, they are I not that I speak for God, but I do think that I think I know the answer. Okay, here. I'm so glad you asked because I love this question.
Mm-hmm.
Success in this life for me is me being truly me. Because I believe God thought me up one day, birthed my soul, placed me here on this planet with, I really hope she makes purple trees, and I really hope she uses her voice. But more than that, I hope she is, I won't even tell you what God calls me. It's kind of embarrassing. It's a cute little pet name. I really hope she is herself. And I think probably it's a bold statement, but all of the dysfunction on this blue rock can be traced back to us not being our true selves. And so success for me is if I continue to evolve into the person I have been created to be.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, I like that. So the last one is very lighthearted.
Okay.
So, and it's it may jive with the subject matter. I don't know. You tell me.
All right, let's see.
We talk a lot about life hacks.
Mm-hmm.
Give us a few of yours.
Life hacks. Ooh, let's see. Okay. Well, all right. This is not a quick and easy, like if your car doesn't start, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm learning something about myself. I've been reading about, I don't know if any of you or your listeners will be familiar with internal family systems. It's a branch of psychotherapy, I think. I don't know, maybe that's the wrong word, but it's a branch of psychology anyway. And essentially, what I'm learning to do is when I'm really triggered by something in this present moment, especially if I'm like, wait, I'm more upset than this situation seems to call for, I pause and I ask myself, have I ever felt this way before? And something usually comes up and I have a memory or I can visualize myself. It's usually buried in my childhood experiences where I have had the same feeling before. And over the years, I turned my back on that experience and said it doesn't matter anymore. And that memory still lives in me. And so I'll give you a quick example. I'm on a hike recently. I don't mean to be on this hike. I'm really pissed off that my husband has decided that we're going to hike 10 miles in one day. And so my husband was like an Eagle Scout, like he loves the outdoors and I love the outdoors, but I'm not all that athletic anymore. And I don't want to be on this hike. And so I am mad. And I mean, like, I am livid.
Yeah.
And I'm stomping and kicking and making sure to show with my body how upset I am to be on this hike so that my husband will know and feel sorry for me and wish that he hadn't brought me here and remember never to do this to me again.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Obviously,
Like clearly, like it's very, very grown up of me. So I fall down, like I stumble and I fall down and like in my anger. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I'm so angry." And then I have this new skill that I'm learning through internal family systems. And I'm like, why am I so angry, Annie? Really, why? So I paused and I asked myself, when have I felt this way before? And instantly I had a memory from childhood pop up. And it was like this young girl experienced some real trauma. And then I locked her away and I didn't let her acknowledge that her trauma was what it was. And she felt forced her entire childhood. This is not a one-time thing that I experienced. It was from the time I was 8 till the time I was 14. And it was over and over and over. I had to do this thing that I didn't want to do, and I had to do it to please the adults, and it made the most sense. And there were all these reasons around it, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I'm on this hike, realizing I have this exiled character still within me who's so mad about being forced to do something she doesn't want to do. And not that that invalidates at all my real anger at my husband for making me go on this hike, but it explains why it's so big.
Yeah.
And so I then said, honey, I want you to know I am mad at you, but not all of this anger is about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I could, unpack over time those traumatic childhood experiences that I endured and tend to that wounded girl who still lived in me in a
Right.
compartment and do the work of reintegrating her into my whole psyche and my whole self. So,
And
that's
then,
kind of like
but
that.
then, but then what do you do? Like once you've identified the thing, what do you do with that? I mean, how do you process that? Like, so I was having like real reactions because that's my tool too. And yeah, and I went through this program at my church. It was called Brave Enough. And they give you this tool and it's called the 3 W's, the lie and the truth.
Okay.
So what am I feeling?
Uh-huh.
Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
What is the first time I've ever felt this way?
Yep.
And what is the truth?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we get stuck on that last one
Yep.
about like, what's the lie or whatever it is, then we're not progressing into what is true. If
Mm-hmm.
that's not true, then what is true?
Right.
Because we've believed this thing about ourselves. We wrote this story about ourselves. We locked that girl away.
Yep.
We have these ruts in our mind that have been there a long time. And we have to, like, it takes work, like, to break those. And so, I think that like replacing with some kind of truth, and usually with me and with the group, it's like, it's some kind of scripture, like, but I mean, it could be whatever. It could be, as long as it's good, true, good and true, because I feel like,
there's a really fantastic book called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
And if anybody's interested in learning this modality and how to do this kind of therapeutic reintegration of our exiled parts, that's where I say that's a good place to start to really begin to answer your question, because it requires a great deal of careful attention to find an exile within us. Recognize, there's this whole system. There's a protector probably standing outside the door, keeping them locked in and keeping you from going in. It's this whole thing.
Right.
And learning, okay, now the what now for the Bill Davises of the world. Like, okay, so now we know about this. Now what? To gently restore that person within us to a position of honor and health. It's actually not that hard once you've identified it. It's like not the hardest part. I think the hardest part is stopping in the middle of the emotion and going, when have I felt this way before? And having the presence of mind to recognize that there might be more going on than the present scene.
Absolutely. There always is. There always is something under there.
More to the story. Yeah.
Okay. Bill asks everybody, you need to ask her, what do you like? What's her legacy going to be?
Yeah. What's your legacy? I think we got a hint of it, but what do you want your legacy to be?
So I have this metaphor that I'm like a tree and I'm growing.
You're purple, right?
I'm definitely purple. Oh yeah. I may have mentioned that my obsession with trees. That's funny though. In my legacy picture, my tree is a normal tree. I want to grow into the fullest expression of my own self that I can.
Yeah.
And at my funeral, I would love it if my daughters could say, she loved with her whole heart, and anybody in her presence knew they were treasure. And I would love them to say she was like no one else. She was just herself.
Mm.
And then, of course, this goes without saying by now, they would begin and end the service with invocations and prayers to and worship of Jesus and his mama and papa, because
Yes.
that's what I want to leave behind. Like, don't leave
Yes.
out the mama.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This has been such great stuff. This has really been a beautiful show. And I just thank you for being here and sharing all of your life and your insight. And, I mean, it's really brave to come out and like talk about these things out in the open, because
Thank you.
and I just want to acknowledge that because, I'm sure that, you didn't just get here all of a sudden to where you're willing to be this free with yourself and your story and your and your truth. And it's really admirable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. And I just am so grateful for this time.
Yeah.
Thank
you for coming on.
Thanks for asking great questions. Yeah.
Well, sure. And, you mentioned a couple times we could go on and on about that story. Let's do that in another show.
Oh,
right.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll just put a pin in, let's see, what were the topics? We're going to talk about, my extra
the patriarchy, I think.
the patriarchy, right?
And let's tell everybody where they can follow you. I know that you have a book that we can't even promote yet because it's not, but we'll have you on before that gets in the works. But where can we follow you now?
Thank you. The easiest way to find me is at barelychristianfullychristian.com. You can also type in just my name, AnniPonder.com, but it's a little tricky with the spelling because my wonderful parents left the E off of my name, Annie. So that's ANNIPONDER.com. And from there, you can find links to my Instagram and Facebook, and you can sign up for a newsletter if you'd like. I won't spam you. I only write about once a month in my newsletters.
Okay.
And there's a connect if you want to shoot me a message and tell me what you're wrestling with. I'd love to hear from you.
Wow. Great. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Much love.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.